Hi, let's refresh our mind with a little bit of history today.
But before I proceed, I would love to recommend that you watch The Berlin Syndrome, a rather very interesting thriller that came out in 2017.
Many things.
I just want to do this.
It's about a German who took a casual conversation too seriously, not surprised.
You said you want to stay? But are you okay?
Welcome back. My name is Victor, the author of the File Sonja series. This is episode number 19 of Survive. So those of us following the events in here are aware that John Taylor is being flown to Berlin by a terror group called the Shrine Tango Movement. Despite him being clairvoyant, he had not seen this coming.
Clairvoyance. The power or faculty of discerning objects not present to the senses. Ability to perceive matters beyond the range of ordinary perception. What a person sees depends upon the sensitivity of their eye. Some people can distinguish objects at a distance, which makes them invisible to other people. Artists perceive shades of color that ordinary people cannot distinguish, and some people are colorblind. There are even those who cannot see at all, those who are blind. The people who can see the farthest or distinguish the most delicate shades of color are more clairvoyant or clear-sighted than the rest.
The Calm Before the Storm. Berlin on August 12, 1961.
This indeed takes me down to the memory lane of the history of Berlin. So let's talk about the Berlin crisis of 1961.
Border checks at the Brandenburg Gate, as usual. But the border in the middle of the city is still passable.
It's the Cold War conflict between the Soviet Union, presently Russia, and the United States concerning the status of the divided German city of Berlin. It's a war that culminated in the construction of the so-called Berlin Wall in the August of 1961.
Just before 2 o'clock in the morning, soldiers and police advance in the east.
This, of course, started with the Soviet Union. In 1948, when the USSR's blockade of Berlin prevented Western access to that city, the United States and the United Kingdom responded by initiating the Berlin Airlift to keep food and supplies flowing to the Western Berlin and to maintain its connection to the West.
Since the 24th of June 1948, West Berlin has been cut off from the world.
Now, a man called Nikita Khrushchev, who was the USSR premier then, demanded on November 10th of 1958 that the United States and its allies relinquish their occupation roles in Berlin. He basically demanded that if the United States refuses to do so, the Soviet Union would no longer honor their post-war agreement and would rather enter into a separate treaty with East Germany. Now, Eisenhower, the then United States president, refused. And in retaliation, the USSR went ahead to reject the post-war agreements. Khrushchev demanded that Berlin become a free city. The United States and United Kingdom refused, arguing that a free Berlin would, with no access to the communists, would never work.
Glaubte es gar nicht, dass es möglich wäre.
It's hard, and then one saw the reality. It was really true.
So.
Iron and concrete were supposed to stem the mass exodus from the GDR, 125,000 alone this year. East Berliners continue to look in desperation for ways out to freedom. Even policemen risk their lives.
Now, those of us following the events in here are aware that Mr. John Taylor is being flown to Berlin by a terror group called the Shrine Tango Movement. Despite him being clairvoyant, he had not seen this coming. This indeed takes me down to the memory lane of the history of Berlin. So let's talk about the Berlin crisis of 1961. It's the Cold War conflict between the Soviet Union, presently Russia, and the United States concerning the status of the divided German city of Berlin. It's a war that culminated in the construction of the so-called Berlin Wall in the August of 1961. In September 1959, the United States-Soviet talks took place at Camp David, but ended up in a stalemate. As the new administration of the United States, J.F. Kennedy, took office in 1961, the Berlin situation heated up. And by July of 1961, it was estimated that over 1,000 East German refugees were crossing into Western Berlin each day. And if that was left unchecked, it would spell disaster due to economic and demographic drain. So on the night of August 12th of 1961, the East German government backed the USSR, backed by USSR, began to build a barrier between East and West Berlin. The United States didn't intervene because the USSR was exercising control over its sector. Anyways, guys, that was just a little bit of history of the current German capital city, Berlin. John Taylor is being flown to this city by his captors, and I'm curious about what is about to happen next. I'm not quite certain he sees his future at the moment, but like I've said, this man is clairvoyant. Now, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to proceed from where I left in the previous episode. This is episode number 19 of Survive. I insist the money be wired to a secure account of my choice. I'll run the errand, sir, he said. Just sink your ship. As the halo overflew the humid atmosphere above the Black Forest, I sat erect, staring and impaired by 1,000 reflections in my mind. John, stop staring at me, said Miles. I'm in the first-class unit now. It's a long story. All is well with you? All is well, I said. It's been about, what, 9 years now? Truth to tell, in a state of profound excitement, Miles replied to the affirmative and confined himself with an implicit stare about the control wheel. Instructions coming in through his earpiece and sealed his lips. Now, we are now at Berlin, Alexanderplatz. It was 3 a.m. already, Central European Standard Time. The chopper landed on a private helipad between Alexanderplatz and Wandsek Street. We took Wilhelm Street in a dark blue van and drove past Brandenburg Tor. For 15 minutes, we drove along Unter den Linden 2, Unter den Linden 3, and Russian Embassy before arriving at number 6 Humboldt University. Mind telling me where this ends? Humboldt University, replied Miles in a strained German modulation. Jake interrupted. We are calling at Professor Dr. Wilhelm Gutenberg. I beg your pardon? Gutenberg. Wilhelm Gutenberg, replied Jake. Mission G Prof begins right here, now, sir. Mark my words. Who is this professor you are talking about? I asked. Must I kill him or something? John, look here, said Jake. You are not to assume the professor has better brains. He is a genius, all right, but you guys are made of the same timber. So this is how it starts? Mark my words, buddy, mark my words. I knew you'd ask that of me. Here, take a look. Jake drew a small surveillance image transmission gadget, pressed on the remote switch and turned a rectangular knob 3/4 way anti-clockwise. I waited anxiously. At the bottom left of the monitor appeared an old man applying glasses to his eyes. It was Professor Gutenberg, the university don to whom it was by all means necessary that I should get acquainted. But so much for the professor. I only saw a sad tadpole of brilliance with a belly double the circumference of my torso. How do I know there is something else you are not telling me? I mean, I've spent 9 years without remembering who I am. Was this part of the plan? Is there a connection to all this? I'm pleased as punched to impress my evaluation of Professor Wilhelm. When he popped out on the screen, he had a peculiar swag, surprisingly, that should amaze academic goers and comers in the scientific world.
The landing of the Shrine Tango movement in Berlin marks the end of my today's episode. Please hit the subscribe button below to support the channel. Up until the next one, goodbye.